Michael Borges, thank you so much for joining me. It's always good to see you.
Thank you for having me back.
So overall, how do you think the association did? I mean, if you guys were to say, yay, we did great, or no, we didn't do so well, you're sort of somewhere in the middle, it sounds like to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's depending how you look at the budget, it's either half full or half empty. From our standpoint, I think it's more half full, and it's because we didn't get a $1.9 or $2 billion increase in school aid like we requested or like the Educational Conference Board requested. We did get a 6% increase in school aid, and that's the largest it's been in the past 5 years. So a $1.4 billion increase in school aid is on the plus side.
Yeah, tell me how you're calculating that, because Speaker Hastie keeps using this $1.6 billion number, and that's not the number that anyone else is using. So
Right.
you're saying 1.4, which is closer to what the Senate is saying. Initially, I think that the administration said 1.33. So it all depends on what categories you're including in that bottom line.
Right. Well, the school aid runs, actually, if you total those, and they add up to be 1.299, so 1.3 billion there. And then there's the 75 million for underperforming or failing schools, that pot of money. And plus the governor also has continuation of some of his competitive grant programs that are in there. There's also money for pre-K, which we haven't been able to find yet. So that could mean the difference between the 1.4 and the 1.6. So we're still looking into where all this money is adding up to.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about a budget that passed over a series of days, but the ALPHA bill, which includes the education and also ethics for some reason, was last night, and lawmakers, and that means everyone else too,
Right.
didn't get the copy of the many hundreds of pages
Right.
until several hours before they started voting. So we don't. It's a very dense document. It's hard to go through line by line and figure out what's where exactly.
Oh, yes.
The governor has been calling this transformational, basically, that it's really going to reset school policy in New York. Is that a correct assessment? Is he right, or is he spinning?
Well, I think he didn't get the whole loaf. He got part of a loaf, and he had a compromise on a lot. But he did get a lot of what he wanted in the budget. You know, he got reform of teacher tenure. So it's instead of being 3 years, he wanted 5. He ended up with 4. He wanted to expedite removal of bad or underperforming teachers.
Right.
He got some progress in that direction, and he made it tougher to become a teacher, and he made it easier to get rid of bad teachers. So, I mean, he didn't get all of what he wanted. He got portions of what he wanted. So, if I was the governor, I'd be doing somewhat of a victory lap.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's supposed to be 4 years for teacher tenure, but it could be longer, because if in your 4th assessment year as a newbie teacher, or sort of like a probationary teacher, if you will,
right.
if you don't get effective in that 4th year, you can't get
extended
tenure.
Another year. Yeah.
So and if you are deemed ineffective for 2 consecutive years, the district can start to try to get rid of you. After 3 consecutive years, the district must try to get rid of you, and your appeals process is pretty limited there. So I can understand why the union is having a little bit of a freak out.
Well, yeah,
this.
I mean, from their point of view, this is a very bad budget. But
Right.
if you're looking at it from the governor's standpoint, or from the standpoint perhaps of trying to make the process more workable, I think the governor is headed in the right direction in that regard.
What is the association's point of view about I shouldn't say all, but the increased focus and responsibility that is now being given to SED?
Well, it's amazing that during the budget process, they were talking about having an independent commission.
Right.
And then it went to the regions, and now SED, and so it went through several iterations before they arrived at, we're running out of time, let's punt, and let's give this task to the State Education Department and the Board of Regents to figure out in the short term. And again, they're the experts, and it's an opportunity for the educational establishment, for the educational advocates to have their input into the process. So I think that's a good thing. Instead of having the legislature arbitrarily decide what factors are going to go into a teacher evaluation. So again, in the past, this was rushed, and it was being rushed again this time. I'm glad that there's more time to look into what should go into a teacher's evaluation, whether it's testing, whether it's about observations, combination of both.
Well, they're pretty delineated. I mean, in my understanding, at any rate, of what's in this bill is the SED just can't, out of whole cloth, create a new APPR. I mean,
Right,
they are
right.
fairly prescribed.
It's the band of ratings. It's
Right.
what percentage goes to what. You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, there's some leeway there, and they're going to be responsible for coming up with that definition. And I think because of SED and the Board of Regents' involvement, that other stakeholders will be able to influence what that happens.
Right. Well, that'll be interesting. I mean, again, the regents and the SED are not controlled by or selected by the governor. SED doesn't have a commissioner right now.
Right.
So we have sort of an agency that's in flux and is influenced a lot by the Democrats in the Assembly, and it's going to be in charge. So we'll see what they come up with effectively. Also, good for you guys, and going back to the half full, half empty thing, is that some things got put off.
Right.
The danger is that things that you didn't like, charter school cap,
Right.
additional charter school funding, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
The
education tax credit.
Education tax credit.
Right.
Okay, put off for later doesn't mean gone.
Right. Well, again, the governor, I mean, has the most leverage in the budget process.
He does,
which is
it's
why
true.
he tried to cram everything into the budget process. So, yes, they weren't, those things that were anathema to public schools weren't in the budget, and perhaps they will be, that will be risen again later on in the legislative session. But we're hoping that, with it decoupling from the budget process, that we'll have a better shot at making sure that doesn't happen.
What do you make of the NYSUT president's call for parents to opt their children out of testing?
Well, I think that's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to not having their way in the budget process, and I think it really does a disservice to the kids that we're all trying to educate and serve. Telling teachers and parents that the tests are not viable or not shouldn't be used to both evaluate teachers and to determine whether your kids are succeeding or not in school, I think is not the best thing to do.
I have seen reports, is it at this point really a gray area of what will happen if a certain percentage, they're aiming for 250,000 kids to opt out. The opt-out movement is aiming, and we're now in April, so it's test month. If, in fact, schools fall below a certain participation rate, what we are hearing is that they will be in jeopardy of losing Title IX money from the feds.
Right.
But the state isn't really sure how they're going to deal with anybody, really. And so I don't know that this is very uncharted territory.
It is, yes.
So are you guys talking about that? And will it affect your folks? You guys do mostly, you handle the financial aspect. That means money coming in and money coming out. So you've got to be concerned.
Right. Again, it's all local decisions. It's the local school boards deciding whether they're going to opt in or opt out or not, and whether they're going to obey the law. And, I think they have to rely on their legal counsel to determine whether it's best for them. And so, but from a standpoint of the association, we try to comply with the law and the regulations that are in place, so we don't jeopardize the funding that is due to our school districts.
Well, and that again, it brings us a little bit back to APPR too. APPR, so it's the performance evaluation, is a large part still resting on testing.
Yes.
There's at least one mandated state test, and maybe as many as two, depending on what locals decide to opt in for. SED just gets to decide what that second one is, and what the weight will be remains to be seen.
Right.
So if you undercut test performance, it seems like a direct effort to undercut APPR effectively in a sort of a circuitous bit of a way. My question to you is also, if you have no tests, then you effectively have no APPR. If you have no APPR, you don't get your increase in aid.
Correct. Right.
And that also has to be concerning to you
guys.
Yes,
that's very troublesome, especially for those school districts who rely on state aid the most. So, again, I think hopefully the rhetoric will be tempered as time goes on, and that we can all work collaboratively to address this issue in a productive manner. And I think we have more to lose by not collaborating together to solve this problem than going off on our own.
Yeah, I'm curious if you think that districts have more to lose now under this new situation that we just approved than they did under the old situation.
Well, I think the governor made some progress in streamlining both the in terms of teacher tenure and evaluation of teachers, and getting rid of underperforming teachers or bad teachers.
Right.
And so, on the plus, that's a plus. On the bad side is, tying all this stuff to funding and whether, we get our aid based on whether local school districts decide to implement the, the APPR or testing out or opting out of the test. So I think it's a right now it's a very convoluted state of affairs, and we need more information before we can proceed.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you: do you have any of the 27 schools that are deemed failing at this point? That means 10 years or more at this moment in the first. You don't?
No.
Okay. So in terms of,
I mean, priority schools are listed by the SED. SED determines what those priority schools are. There's a lot of overlap between the 178 that the governor has referred to and those priority schools. So those 178, I believe, includes the priority schools, which are the ones that have been failing for 10 years, as well as the ones who are those are consistently failing, and those are just failing.
Right.
So and the SED has various enumerations of what that means. And so I think there's a lot of overlap between those two designations.
Did you think that what came out in this in terms of helping those failing schools or before they go into receivership was fair?
Well, I think it's a long way from what the governor wanted. And he was going to go from just failing to having receivers come in and charter schools and take over. Now there's more of an intermediate step. He's giving school districts the opportunity to once again use local control, local leadership to try to resolve a problem. And he's actually given us $75 million, more additional funding to help solve some of those problems, as well as giving the superintendent and the local school district the opportunity to change, whether it's a longer school day, a longer school year. So he's given us the flexibility, which is what we've been asking all along, to try to solve our own problems.
Well, Michael Borges, hopefully you'll come back, and when we figure out a little bit more, we're just still, as you said, working through the details, and also we have to see what SED is going to do, and hopefully you'll come back and talk about that with us. Thank you.